We're back at Talk Radio 930 WTAD. Congressman Aaron Schock is in the studio. Always glad to have you. And again, thank you, because a lot of times people, once they get elected, they never want to come back and answer any questions. They're always your friend when they're running for something, but where are they later? So I really thank you for keeping in touch with your
Mary, I think
constituents.
we've seen each other much more since I've been in office than we did before I was in office.
Well, I will say this. When you used to come, you didn't have any entourage with you. You still keep it to a minimum, but now secret forces, I guess, have to protect you. I've got a couple of things on my mind, and then I do want you, of course, to address whatever issues you want the citizens back here to know about. But real quickly, the new Philadelphia Park District designation to be part of the national park system.
Yeah.
Now, ironically, of course, at a time when we have fewer and fewer dollars, it seems, in the federal government for things,
right.
Here's something that many people would say absolutely isn't necessary at all.
Yeah.
Yet others say, if our history isn't important to us, what are we as a country?
Exactly.
So you're supporting this. Tell us your take on
Yeah,
this.
well, look, those are valid concerns. They're concerns that members of Congress and the House had as I introduced this piece of legislation. People said, first of all, where is New Philadelphia? What's it all about? And then the second question, of course, is would anybody go there if it was a national park? First of all, let's talk about what New Philadelphia is. It is the first settlement founded by a freed slave decades before the Civil War. Frank McWhorter bought his freedom, that of his wife and 16 family members, went and founded New Philadelphia in Illinois. It became an integrated community. Blacks and whites lived together. Their children attended the same schoolhouse in the town. It's an amazing story in the district that Abe Lincoln would go on and be elected to the United States Congress for one term. It's miles away from the Abe Lincoln Presidential Museum, which is today the most visited presidential museum in America, which is amazing because it's in Springfield, Illinois. And so to my friends in New York and my friends in California and all the other wonderful states that think they're more important, my message to them was, look, this is an important part of American history. It's an important part of the history of the Midwest and Central Illinois, where we've always been an inclusive population. It's not by happenstance that Abe Lincoln was elected to this congressional seat, that Everett McKinley Dirksen, who went on and ushered in the Civil Rights Bill, was elected to this district, that Oscar Stanton DePriest, the first African-American elected to Congress, was from Illinois, so this region. And so the point is that this is a part of that important history, and making it a national park basically puts it on the map. It doesn't mean that you're going to have slews of park rangers or big facilities built up. It's basically a spot on the tourism map, if you will, to say, look, if we're going to come learn about Lincoln, if we're going to come learn about the Underground Railroad and the Civil Rights Movement, then New Philadelphia should be a part of that story that's being told, and that's really what this effort is all about.
Realistically, what are the chances that you will get national park designation?
Well, Mary, it passed the House of Representatives unanimously, and now it's in the Senate, where Mark Kirk and Dick Durbin, in a show of bipartisanship and support for this effort, are pushing through it on the Senate. Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, has signed off on it. Every Republican but one so far has signed off on it. So people have legitimate concerns about what is the potential cost, what is the cost benefit, but I think we'll get there. And if a vote is held in the Senate, I'm confident it will pass.
Okay. Let's talk about the economy. We just were. I don't know that we were rocked. These things kind of happened in Quincy, and they kind of converged all at once. But Quincy Compressor is kind of saying, well, it's time to go to Alabama. Working conditions there and labor conditions there are better. We've had a restaurant close just unceremoniously, which was strange for its employees because, you know that decision wasn't made that morning.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of things that have closed, religious bookstores, etc. What is the state of our economy now? As a young man, you ran on, I'm the future. I want, my children. I want myself to have a job.
Yeah.
And it seems like our economy, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah.
What's your assessment?
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of that uncertainty is being bred by the federal government. Let's back up and know about what we just learned this week. 2 days ago, the president unilaterally issued new EPA Clean Air Standard guidelines, which is going to make it almost impossible to build a new coal-fired plant in America and render most of the coal-fired plants in America out of business. That is a huge shock not just to the hardworking coal workers in the coal-fired plants, in the coal mines that have head of household jobs. I have 2 coal-fired plants in my district that were closed since the president was in office and issued new EPA guidelines. One in Meridosha and another part of my district. 50 head of household jobs gone. But let's take the energy jobs out of the picture. What happens when you close coal-fired plants? The cost of electricity goes up. Either labor or energy is either the first or the second most expensive portions of the input costs on construction here, not construction, but manufacturing in the United States. And so when you artificially increase the cost of energy, you're making yourself less competitive as a region and in our case as a country. Illinois has always led in energy competitiveness. Believe it or not, our cost of labor has been higher than neighboring states, but because we have vast coal reserves, our state is basically a giant coal deposit, and Ameren, which supplies downstate Illinois with almost all of its energy, is coal-fired, and Illinois is one of the most nuclear states in the country with 5 nuclear plants. That means we have an abundance of energy. We actually export. We sell to not only neighboring states, but also Canada, a lot of our electricity because we supply more than what we consume. That means we have lower energy rates. When you put these coal-fired plants out of business, guys like Quincy Compressor, Titan Wheel, Caterpillar, John Deere, all of these companies, they're going to pay more for their input costs, and it's going to make them less competitive. So the question begs, if you're an entrepreneur and the administration is issuing these new guidelines that are raising your cost of inputs, making it more expensive for you to operate, would you want to take risk right now? Would you want to go out and stick your neck out even if you have the cash? No, you're going to hold back. You're going to be more conservative than necessary. So the overall economy has not been rebounding and growing as it needs to. Last quarter, we actually shrunk by 1%, our GDP. That is a bad thing, not just for people in the workforce, but those in college that are looking to enter in the workforce. We need about 300,000 jobs a month just to keep up with new entrants into the workforce from college graduates.
What about, you mentioned Meridosha. Now there's a plan to take that and capture that carbon dioxide emission and store it underground, which would allow it to continue to operate. So some people say, well, we're not exactly anti-coal, we're just anti-dirty coal. I mean, can't there be some new technology that allows us to use our coal but not turn out like China?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, let's talk about that, Mary.
China's air quality is so poor.
Right.
Now, granted, us stopping isn't going to mean China's going to stop, and their winds will blow over on us anyway. But
right. So you can't solve this war. You can't solve this by ourselves, and it's idiotic for us to put ourselves at a competitive disadvantage while all our world competitors continue to leap forward and not care about the environment. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about the environment, and I would argue that we do have clean air, thanks to the EPA. And so for us to, it's like a cost benefit. Right now, our coal-fired plants are cleaner than any in the world. I was just in China. They put a new coal-fired plant on the average of 1 a month, 15 last year. Yeah. And their coal is dirty, and you can see it in the air. But to say that, well, gee, if we have coal, it's going to look like that, it's nonsense. Go to Meridosha. Their air is clean. And the debate really is not about dirty air. It's about carbon.
But
and
do
whether
you
or not
like
you
the
believe
FutureGen project?
Well, I don't believe that carbon is a pollutant. I don't believe that what you exhale out of your mouth it should be taxed and should be regulated. And so, look, we talk about smog, we talk about particulate matter. That is a pollutant. But carbon dioxide, that's the real debate about global warming and the contributions of carbon dioxide. I don't believe carbon dioxide needs to be pumped into the ground. But moreover, I don't think us closing every one of our coal-fired plants is going to do anything to stop global warming in this world. And I do think it will just put us at a competitive disadvantage. But when you asked about the economy and why things aren't turning around, it's because of the Affordable Care Act, which has added a ton of cost to small businesses, uncertainty. We still don't even know what adequate health care coverage is, defined by the federal government, new mandates, new changes. The president keeps issuing executive order after executive order. That adds to uncertainty both to the healthcare industry as well as to the employers who are mandated to provide coverage. You have now people talking about increasing the minimum wage. Seattle just increased it $15 an hour. If you're running a restaurant in the city of Quincy and the state of Illinois increased minimum wage 4 times in the last 10 years, you're saying, gee, when are you going to take the weights off my back? We know that these policies of artificially increasing the cost of labor, artificially increasing the cost of energy, wreak havoc on the industry and jobs and the ability for the economy to grow. And that's why, our state is in such a world of hurt. We have unemployment rate 2% higher in Illinois than our neighboring states. That ought to tell you something. It ought to tell you something that maybe what we're doing isn't working, and elections have consequences.
Let's talk about that unemployment rate. It is down lower now. It's back to where it was before the big crash, which happened right at the end of the Bush administration. And again, I'm not blaming any one person for that. These cycles sometimes happen, and I'm sure you can go along with this as a member of Congress. Things happen, no matter who's in charge. They may be the effect of policies that were 10 years ago. We seem to never be able to be on an even keel. You mentioned manufacturing. Is manufacturing ever going to be able to come back in Illinois? Because that's what we were so good at, and we still have it in Quincy. But now Quincy Compressor's thinking about leaving. And now, who knows about Titan Wheel? That's just a huge, for us, Gardner, Denver. These places all have plants overseas. They all have a factory in China. Yeah. So why would they stay here?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's a good question, but let me first state that these people aren't all leaving to China, and that's I think the big misperception is people say, well, gee, we're shipping jobs overseas. No, these people are going to Alabama, or in the case of ADM, State Farm, Caterpillar. I can name you all the companies in my districts. They're investing in other states. They're moving across the border into Indiana, moving across the border into Wisconsin because of better fiscal policies, because of better leadership. Illinois still has, I would argue, the best assets to compete in this country. We are strategically located in the Midwest. We have the busiest, second busiest airport in the country. We have the busiest rail yard in the country. We have the waterway systems and locks and dams to transport. We have the richest farm ground in the Midwest. You think about higher education institutions, University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Northwestern University, the best universities in the Midwest. So you ask people, what would you look for if you're going to invest in a state? Illinois has got it, way more so than Missouri or Indiana or Wisconsin, but for, I would argue, bad leadership and bad policies, which have made Illinois non-competitive with its neighboring states. So can we recover? Can we rebound? Absolutely, if we change leadership. I grew up in Minnesota for the first 10 years of my life, and we used to laugh at Wisconsin because they were a high-tax, high-regulated, a high bureaucratic state. And now, because of the reforms that Scott Walker put in place, the operators, engineers in Chicago, who I met with, are going over to Wisconsin to work because there's construction projects in Wisconsin now, because there's a boom in Wisconsin now in terms of business development and so on, and their unemployment is significantly lower than Illinois. I mean, this isn't rocket science. We need to wake up and say, hey, Illinois is no worse than Indiana, but for some bad policies. Let's change our policies. Let's make us competitive so that capital wants to flow here. Why do people that that are retiring, why are they moving to Texas? Why are they moving to Florida?
I don't know, because I go to Texas regularly, and I wouldn't live down there if you paid me. But part of it is because I want a park system. I want a public sidewalk. I want a tree growing somewhere in my town.
But Mary,
Dallas, Texas
let's
is
be
just a
honest.
big, vast wasteland of concrete from one edge of the metroplex to the other. And
Okay.
yeah, the cost of living down there is low. Great. There's, what it has to offer compared to my beautiful hometown of Quincy, Illinois, I wouldn't trade.
Yeah, I agree.
However,
Quincy is hard to beat, but maybe you should go to Austin. That's maybe more your style, or perhaps Naples or Orlando or Miami. My point is that don't tell me that these states don't have sidewalks or streets or parks. Okay, what they do have is a government that knows how to live within a balanced budget.
Okay.
And they have a tax rate that doesn't suffocate you, and they're not going to take half of what you earn when you die, so you can't leave it to your kids or your favorite charity. And that's why people move to these states. And we need to wake up and. No, sure, there's jobs there because there's money there and there's growth there, but I'm talking about retirees.
Yeah.
Why would you leave your grandkids and your neighbors and your friends and your church and everything you grew up with and move to these states? But for the cost of staying has reached too high, and people say, I'm out of here. We've got to stop that trend if we want to grow again here in Illinois.
Under Aaron Schock, snow will be outlawed in Illinois. It's a new bill he's pushing through Congress. Cold weather. We're going to have a Florida climate. If global warming keeps up, they won't have to move. God, we've solved all the problems today. Let's talk a little bit about, the problems that are going on in Washington, D.C., and I'm sure
Problems?
nobody is more frustrated
What are you talking
than you.
about, problems?
We've got a great system where there's a checks and balances, but we're kind of at a standstill now. You mentioned, Harry Reid's on board with my New Philadelphia, so for 2.2 seconds he's my best friend, and when he signs off on that bill, but
well,
then
I'm not
we're
saying
right
he's
back.
my best friend,
We're right back. We're right back to where we started from. And the Kirk Durbin thing has been lauded and laughed at, whether they should be working together or not. It's kind of intriguing. If you try to get along, you're laughed at. If you are, it's just crazy. But we have the same conversation every time you come here. What is happening? Is there any improvement at all in moving things forward? You mentioned the Affordable Health Care Act. I mean, it is our law, and we're trying to move forward with it. And some people, yourself and many others, don't want that. They don't think that's progress, so they are trying to roll that back. In the meantime, though, like you said, it's kind of created a little bit of a chaos. And we'll wait till after this election cycle, or wait till after the presidential election cycle. We cannot sit around and wait 2, 4, 6 years for something to happen in the United States because people like yourself are trying to get reelected. When are we going to solve these problems?
Well, first of all, I'm not waiting to get reelected to solve problems. In fact, quite the contrary. On Affordable Care Act, you'll remember the House of Representatives put forward a series of reforms to this law, not repealing the law. Yeah, we've tried to repeal it. We get the joke. The president's never going to go there. But the point is we had provisions to postpone the individual mandate. We had provisions to allow for high deductible plans. We had provisions to allow for cross-state competition. All of these were rejected by the president. Some of which, mind you, later were unilaterally done by the president through executive order. And that is not only frustrating to Republicans but to Democrats alike, who were told, drink the Kool-Aid, say the cheer song, be a lawyer soldier, and then wada bing, wada bam, they wake up and the president's unilaterally made the changes that he vowed he would never do. So part of this is a credibility problem with the president because he has shown such a disdain to the legislative branch, regardless of whether they're Republicans or Democrats. And this latest move with the soldier, I think, really continues to undermine whether or not he believes in the rule of law and what the rules say, the laws say about his required consultation with a co-equal branch of government. He's not king. Congress is a co-equal branch, equal power to the executive, and he has responsibilities to report to us when it says so in the law. But where can we go? I'm pushing for us to do immigration reform. I know this gets me, and some people within my party get their ears raised and say, "Oh my gosh, people are talking about amnesty." No, but I certainly would never vote for amnesty. Okay, but to stick your head in the sand and say, "Well, gee, I'm afraid of what could happen if we do something, so we're going to do nothing," is just allowing this problem to fester. Is allowing for more people to come here illegally, which is wrong. And by the way, it's more than border security, which is important, but 40% of our problem are people who came here on a legal visa and overstayed their visa. So why we need a beefed up visa enforcement program so we know if you got a 3-month or 6-month or 1-year visa, when that visa expires, you cannot get a job. You cannot get a driver's license. You cannot get on an airplane in the United States. And we need to have the mechanisms in place to kick people out of the country once their visas expire. That's 5 million of the 12 million people who are here illegally. So my point is that Republicans, what I tell my party is, look, we're about fixing broken government. We got to lean in and try and work on this immigration problem because it's something where I think the president and our party agree that there's something that needs to happen. Now, are we going to agree on everything? No. But just as some Republicans in the Senate voted for a Democrat-leaning immigration reform bill, if we're going to do it in the House, Democrats are going to have to be willing to vote for a Republican-leaning immigration reform bill. But that's something that I think for the ag industry in my district, for the high-tech engineering manufacturing folks in my district is important, and for the families, quite frankly, who have loved ones that are trying to follow the law and come here and do the right thing, want a better way of life as generations before me and yours as well did. We need to fix this program. So that trade agreements also was just in Japan with the president. TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, those 12 countries we're looking to do a trade agreement with represent 40% of the entire world's GDP. Huge markets for Illinois agriculture, huge markets for Illinois manufacturers, and oh, by the way, countries like Japan are already shipping their automobiles and their Sony TVs to us tariff-free. So it's a no-brainer for us to do a trade agreement with them, and that's something that hopefully would create some jobs here back home as well.
You're listening to Republican Congressman Aaron Schock. Our phone lines are open at 223-9300, 1-800-228-WTAD. We entertain your questions and comments. Keep them brief. 223-9300, 1-800-228-WTAD. We only have 20 minutes remaining with the Congressman, so please call now so we can get you in line to ask your question. You have done a lot of international travel, and I've hesitated to ask you about some national issues because foreign policy is more the purvey of the Senate, not the House. But you did mention the Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, who was rescued, or whatever happened. He's back in a hospital on American soil at a German military hospital. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel says it's unfair to the family to leap to conclusions about his behavior in uniform. Hagel says we don't do that in the United States, but that seems to be something that everybody is doing. Now, just in brief, what is your take on this? You mentioned you're irritated that the president did not consult with Congress as a co-equal branch. How do you keep a secret from, you tell 500 people, how do you keep that a secret?
Well,
just
first of all, I'm not sure that us negotiating 5 known terrorists so threatening that the Bush and the Obama administration kept them at Guantanamo Bay, refused to release them from Guantanamo Bay. Mind you, we have released several hundred detainees at Guantanamo Bay that the Obama administration, with consultation from Congress, said, you know what, these guys really aren't as bad, they're not as much of a threat, we've gotten whatever information we can from them, we're going to let them go back to their countries. Not with these 5. These 5, the Obama administration, for the first 5 years of his term, said, you know what, these guys are bad actors. In fact, they're middle to high level terrorists within the Al-Qaeda organization.
So bad that even though he said he closed Guantanamo, he's still willing to keep them there, or was.
Exactly. So the fact that the president would say, or Chuck Hagel would say, well, gee, how do you keep a secret? Who says we need to keep a secret? I mean, the purpose of the law is that you don't trade known terrorists without consulting with Congress. That's the law of the land. So for them to say, well, gee, we wanted to keep this a secret, that's the problem. That's exactly the problem. This was never going to remain a secret. The idea that somehow Mr. Bergdahl's life would be risked by the terrorists knowing that we're negotiating with him. They already knew we were negotiating. The only people that didn't know we were negotiating with terrorists are the American people. And oh, by the way, Bergdahl's life only became more valuable when these guys actually thought, oh my gosh, we can get 5 of our buddies back, we can get 5 of our top lieutenants in Al-Qaeda back. The dangerous precedent, what I'm upset about is not this deal. I am upset about the deal, but I'm more upset about the dangerous precedent it sets. If you can get 5 known top-level Al-Qaeda terrorists out of Guantanamo Detention Center for one guy who deserted his post, we know that. He walked off his post, his buddies reported it when he walked off, he shipped his belongings back home before he deserted his post, and our military did everything within our power immediately to go find him and rescue him, so much so that we lost 14 of our men. 14 people died trying to get Mr. Bergdahl back. So for anyone to argue, Chuck Hagel or others, to say, well, America needed to do everything it needed to do to get him back, absolutely. But we don't negotiate with terrorists, and giving 5 known leaders out of Guantanamo Bay in exchange for this fella is a huge mistake. Not only on this deal, but the precedent that it says moving forward. I mean, what the heck? This guy deserted his post. What if they capture Mary Griffith? What if they capture Aaron Schock? Who's to say if you want some people let go, let's just start rounding people up? I mean, I really, people laugh. This is a serious deal. You start negotiating with terrorists, and by the way, 5-1. I don't care whether you're trading jelly beans for chiclets. 5-1 ain't a fair trade. I mean, 5 terrorists for 1 deserter from our military is outrageous. And I think, obviously Congress is out of session this week. We're back in our districts, but some of my close Democratic friends that I've talked to, they're equally outraged. I mean, you don't have to have half a brain to realize this is a raw deal and sets a bad precedent for America. And
could have very serious repercussions in the future, but we don't necessarily know everything. You know what we don't, Marion? You know what, though? I'm tired of this crap. Okay? I'm tired of the Obama administration walking out when there's a crisis and there's a scandal and saying, oh, we just learned about this. We just learned about this on the news.
hogwash. I'm tired of him walking out when he can't defend what he just did, okay, and saying, well, there's maybe more to the story. Don't rush to judgment. I don't need to know more of the story. The guy deserted his post. He put his comrades in harm, and people died trying to get his butt back, okay? That is a court-martialable offense. It's a crime. It's against the oath that he takes when he's sworn in as a member of our armed forces. And he needs to be held accountable. His bad behavior does not need to be rewarded. And quite frankly, I don't need to know more information about whether his health might have been in jeopardy or not. He put the men and women of the U.S. Armed Forces' lives at risk. People died trying to get him back. He deserted his post, which is a violation, a court-martialable offense.